Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Tina, holistic brain health practitioner at Lifelong Enerjoy. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the scarcity trap. And the reason why this is really important is because a lot of times if we feel like we're in lack mode, and I know that well, I've been in lack mode most of my life, you get into this state of scarcity, which becomes very hard to get out of. So it's called the scarcity trap, and it's for a reason, right? And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why people get into that trap and how to get out of it, okay? So the scarcity trap does not just apply to money. It can apply to not having enough time. It can apply to not having enough of anything. So it could be time or money or support or having enough friends or anything like that, right? It even can be applied to a drug if you are addicted and you feel like you need that hit, right? And what's fascinating about the idea of the scarcity trap is that if we get caught in this state of lack, of feeling like we don't have enough of something, what happens is that our vision becomes tunneled, and all we do, because this is the way humans are built, is that we go into this survival instinct of how am I going to get that next thing, whether it's money or time or friends or support or your drug, right? And what happens is that our brains go from being able to think and problem solve in a more holistic way to getting very tunneled and focused on just getting that next thing that we need, okay? And there's this common belief system, for example, with people who are poor that, oh yeah, they make bad decisions. Well, here's the thing, is that they may be making bad decisions, but if you put any of us, regardless of how much money we made, in a situation, in that same situation of poverty, where we have no support or no belief that we can attract more money, in a feasible way, we're going to also lose our ability to think clearly, okay, and to really see our problem at a much bigger level, okay. And how do I know this? Well, interestingly enough, there's some research to back up what I've just said. So, for example, and you can't just like take a group of people and say, okay, I'm going to give you lots of money, tons of money, and then take it all away, right? You can't just do that, right? So there's a really fascinating natural experiment that has occurred in India. And in India, every year, there are sugarcane farmers. And these sugarcane farmers get paid only one time a year, just one time a year. So that means that, and they get paid after harvest. So that means that during the entire year, they are lacking, or they have different amounts of money depending on the time of year, right? So right before harvest, they become very poor because they're the end of whatever windfall that they've gotten after harvest, right? And then harvest comes and they have all this money. And so what happens to these people's brains before harvest when they're poor and after harvest when they're rich? Well, some scientists from Harvard and Princeton went and studied this group of people and found out that they had literally a change in cognitive functioning equivalent to about 10 IQ points, okay? So what they have, when you're able to do problem solving, it's called fluid intelligence, where you can sort of see the big picture and really make good decisions about what to do with your life. That's called fluid intelligence. And that's what they were losing with that lack of, without that cushion underneath. And when they were desperate for money, they lacked fluid intelligence. So again, their brains became so tunneled and so focused on what they needed that they weren't able to make bigger or better decisions about long-term financial health. And so that has like a myriad of consequences. For example, if somebody is, there's a lot of stories. I actually got a lot of this information from Shankar Vedantam's Hidden Brain podcast. He has a wonderful episode on this. And there's some great stories of people who, when they're in that mode of lack, they make decisions that are just based on getting that next thing. So, for example, if you're, they talked about one person who had, a fine job and then just had a series of losses where she became really impoverished and she had to feed her children. And so when she got money, when she got a credit card, she spent it all on groceries and things that she needed in the long term, but then she ran out of money for gas, right? So because she had not been able to see the big picture, she was just so hyper-focused on getting those things that she hadn't had for her kids, right? So that's what can happen when we have that tunnel vision. Another example, Barbara Enright talks about this in her book, Nickel and Dimed Across America, where she had put herself in an impoverished situation where she tried to survive on only a minimum wage and minimum wage jobs. And she found that when you're stuck in that mindset of poverty, all you can think about is getting a roof over your head and the next, groceries, food on the table, right? And so because she struggled to save enough under those poverty conditions, she would have to think about living in a hotel. And living in a hotel is in the long run much more expensive, but it allows you to pay on a short-term basis, right? So there are all these benefits that we have when we have more money that we don't think about, that people don't have when they're in poverty. Payday loans. People in poverty can be subject to payday loans with high interest rates that maybe the rest of us can avoid if we have a cushion underneath our belt, right? So there's all these choices